Captain Humphries will join us because, again, as I mentioned, I am not a smart man. Many things I do not know about. One of them is how a grand jury works. Why should you care, dear listener? Well, if you're in the Cape Fear area, you're familiar with the Gen X battle with Chemours. And, well, once upon a time, the federal government had convened a grand jury and failed to secure an indictment against Chemours. And the things I do know about a grand jury is that they are ridiculously expensive, and there is a lot of time invested. I mean, it's not like, grand juries are not like AA meetings where they have 7 in a neighborhood every evening. No, see, a grand jury has to be scheduled, convened, selected. Lots and lots of evidence has to be presented, right? I mean, it's a court case or a court case, sort of. Because you're presenting, here's as much as I know, you're presenting as much evidence to the grand jury as you have to ask the grand jury, is this worth pursuing? Should we get an indictment and carry the charges forward? And in the case of Chemours, we have known non-compliance. We have known contamination. They basically confessed, but haven't done anything to correct the issue. And as such, they're, still not. I don't know. They're of course they're fighting tooth and nail. The CEO wants to maintain his $9 million a year bonus. So somebody somewhere made more money than what the grand jury was costing us as taxpayers in the first place, because that's the thing, right? Once we find out how much a grand jury costs, if we can, or at least get a ballpark, then we'll have an idea of how much of our money was pissed away only to get beaten by Chemours somehow with even more money. Because again, a $9 million bonus, you could buy a lot of influence with $9 million, right? Or even, like, if the CEO were to, say, hey, I tell you what, I'll split my bonus. If you don't cost my company any money and don't file any charges against me, I will split the $9 million with you. Doesn't that sound like a deal? Wouldn't you compromise your ethics, your ideals, and your integrity for $4.5 million? I mean, where's the price? What's your price to abandon your fellow man and not return an indictment against a company that has been poisoning your community for decades? I mean, for $4.5 million, you can import your water from Italy if you want, I mean, just. And of course, who's being affected? Well, it's not going to be the people with a lot of money. They're going to buy their own water systems, right? It's going to be you and me, the people that are paying the increased rate from the Cape Fear Public Utility Authority. Oh yeah, it's only becoming important to the public now, because now when they open their water bill and they see an extra, digit somewhere, they're thinking, wait a minute, this ain't right. The cost of beer is going to go up, right? Because what's beer made of? And I'd like a water system that doesn't require me to use, filtered, bottled RO distilled water from which to make my coffee. I'd like to use regular water. But if we have to pay extra for it, we're losing the battle all the way around. Okay, let's move on to some cat stories. I got one on each end of the spectrum. I think I'll start at the beginning and go to the end later. So, apparently, UPI Ben Hooper saving my butt yet again, with news stories. Cat sounds played from a cell phone used to rescue kitten from a storm drain. June 17, authorities in Virginia rescued a kitten from a storm drain using a catch pole and a cell phone that lured the feline out by playing cat sounds. Apparently, we are smarter than our average mammal. Petersburg Animal Care and Control officers responded alongside personnel from Petersburg Public Works and the Petersburg Fire Department, who always get called out when when a cat gets stuck somewhere. That's their job. The fire department puts out fires and saves cats. Okay. When a police officer working on a crime scene in the South Jones Street area reported hearing a kitten crying in the storm drain. So he's on a crime scene and the kitten distracts him. This is an empathetic man. Animal control officer Jessica Calloway attempted to reach the kitten by climbing down 2 different manholes, but the kitten was easily spooked and would flee when approached. The rescuers eventually used a cell phone to play cat sounds that lured the kitten out of hiding to where Calloway could ensnare it with a catch pole. Animal Care and Control said in a Facebook post that Calloway's, quote, catch of the day, quote, weighed in at 2 pounds, 10 ounces, and was absolutely a keeper. Pretty cool, huh? Well, here's what happens when those kittens grow up to become cats. It's coming out of the U.S. Sun, the-sun.com. Who's the poor bastard that saves my butt this time? Apparently no credit given to author. Oh, Henry Holloway. Here we go. June 17. Horror death. Woman eaten by 20 pet cats after collapsing dead as cats don't find decomposing body for 2 weeks. Police were horrified when they discovered the partially eaten remains of the woman who has not been named after receiving a call from a concerned coworker. The woman was a cat breeder who kept the 20 giant Maine Coon pedigree cats in her home. Cops were alerted by one of her employees who said she could not contact her boss. Inside her home, police found her partially eaten body surrounded by the hungry cats. Police believe she had been dead for 2 weeks. As they probed her decomposing remains, she was found at the property in Bataks, Rostov region in Russia. The cats were left alone on their own for 2 weeks. There was no food, so what else to eat? Said one animal rescue expert who cared for some of the surviving cats. It's understandable, right? They ate what there was. And some of the healthier cats have now been rehomed to new owners for just £30 each. It is not known, reports local media, whether the new owners were told of their taste for human flesh. Maine Coon cats are noted for their large size and originated in the U.S. state of Maine. It is an extremely popular pedigree cat breed and currently occupying the number 3 slot on the World Pet Cat Popularity List. I didn't know there was one. It is normally known for its passive nature and is often known as the gentle giant. Studies have found that cat owners who die at home risk being eaten alive by their hungry moggies. Moggies? Never heard that. I'm going to look that one up. Watch this. You get the right click right there, and then the little thing pops up. A cat, especially one that does not have a pedigree or is otherwise unremarkable. Oh, so you use that as a joke. I get it. So if you have calicos, it's a moggy, but if it's a pedigree cat like this, it is not. Just so you know, a new English word for you, M-O-G-G-I-E-S, moggies. Scientists made the shocking find after 2 cats broke into their research center to feast on decomposing corpses in Colorado, U.S. Colorado. The pair repeatedly came back to the bodies over several weeks, showing a taste for arm tissues as well as for flesh around the chest and shoulders. Strangely, each cat found a cadaver they liked and stuck with it, choosing to munch on just the one corpse rather than dying on a selection. The main theory is that cats are picky eaters, said scientist Sarah Garcia, an author of a new study on the case. Once they find a food that they like, they'll stick with it. Stories of people living alone who are devoured by their starving cats after they die have been doing the rounds for years. Yes, this is not uncommon. In 2013, a woman who died in her home near Southampton had entire body parts eaten by her 3 ginger tabby cats. One American man in his early 30s was found days after his death with his head, neck, and part of his arm completely defleshed by his 10 pet cats. Despite multiple recorded cases, no one had managed to study the practice scientifically until the study in 2020. The research was published in the Journal of Forensic Science. And as uncomfortable as that makes you, may I remind you that this type of science has been happening for centuries because we are that type of curious. Right? What happens when you leave a dead body in the forest for months, right? So they do studies on these things, as weird, creepy, and inhumane, or whatever you may want to call it as it is. It's still kind of necessary. It's like the investigation into a plane crash. It's really sad that, these people passed, but we have to find out what happened, see if we can't do something about it, fix it so it don't happen no more. So now that we've been working with the cats and we know that they are just horrible, I'm allergic to them. I mean, the only cool cat is a big cat, right? Because if you think about it, little cats are just like, mini-me's of the big cats. So if big cats eat flesh and they track it and kill it themselves or freshly dead, right? They're not exactly scavengers like dingoes or vultures, right? They tend to kill theirs, but they like it fresh. So, you gotta adapt. Anyway, Tweety and Sylvester, it's time to move on to Tweety. In a case of mistaken identity, I guess would be a sideways look at it. Baltimore, 98 Rock, 98 online. Do I have an author? Nope, just New York Post. Cops bust down door to save woman crying help and find a parrot instead. He perfectly parroted a distress call. The UK's finest were flabbergasted after attempting to save what they thought was an elderly woman in distress, only to discover that the victim was actually a parrot yelling help. A tweet detailing the hilarious mix-up is currently blowing up on Twitter. The parrot in the living room talks, reads the uproarious tweet, which was posted Wednesday by the West Midlands Police. An accompanying photo shows an officer posing with the prank-calling parrot in question. The feathery fiasco occurred Wednesday evening after police received a report about an elderly shouting for help inside her house at the Wild Green Sutton Coldfield. Jam Press reported at inside her house at the Wild Green Sutton Coldfield. I guess I don't understand how they do addresses over there. But yeah, Tweety getting a little revenge on the cat there. Get a little 911 action happening. Just because she don't want a deal. And if you think seniors are something to be messed with, we're going to talk wild animals. And a very lively 90-year-old woman. This is written by Jessica Kwong from, where are we, Metro, UK. 90-year-old woman fights off bear with her lawn chair. Yeah, the bear got a swipe at her. A 90-year-old woman attacked by a bear while sitting on her front porch managed to fend it off using her lawn chair. Although Williams was relaxing at her home in Sevierville, Tennessee on Wednesday when the black bear approached her with its 3 cubs nearby. Although Williams was, I was just sitting there. Hadn't been more than 2 or 3 minutes. Evidently it heard me. It just made a lunge at me, Williams told WVLT. Williams said the bear's face was right in my face when she used a lawn chair to stop it from getting closer to her. She emerged from the encounter with just a scratch on her arm. She was treated at a hospital for the wound and came out of it with a bandage. No, it's not a Hello Kitty bandage. I've been praising the Lord ever since because I may not be here, said Miss Williams. She also said she has encountered other bears at her home by the Smoky Mountains National Park. Last year, I had a bear with 3 cubs, she said. It could have been the same bear, but it hadn't even ever bothered me. She said the bears have run away from her in the past. They're afraid of you, so this is really unusual, she said of her latest incident. Williams acted just as she should have, according to Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency spokesman Matt Cameron. The way she responded was exactly what we tell people to do, Cameron told the TV station. To get big, yell loud, and make noise to intimidate them. Pat on the back for how she responded. It very well could have saved her life. The bear that recently attacked Williams then made its way to her neighbor, who responded more aggressively. After the mother bear swatted at the victim, it left that area. From what we are told, it charged another neighbor who shot it. Cameron said once that happened, there was no choice but to euthanize her. The Tennessee Wildlife Research Agency protocol is to euthanize bears that have contact with humans in residential neighbors and other populated areas. Holy cow. That's pretty fierce. To euthanize bears that have contact with humans. Oh, man. You've seen a human prepare to die. Man, that's pretty harsh. I mean, I know we're bad. I know we're a poison on the planet. We're a disease with shoes. We're a virus with opposable thumbs and cognition. But to euthanize a bear just for having contact with humans? I don't know, man. It seemed like they had it going on pretty well. Texas. Here we go to Texas. CBSNews.com. Just written by staff. No one gonna take no credit for this one. Paddleboarder rescue pilot who crashed in Austin Lake, Austin, Texas, coming out of CBS-DFW/AP, which I'm guessing is CBS Dallas-Fort Worth, by way of the Associated Press wire. The pilot crashed a small airplane into Lady Bird Lake, downtown Austin, was helped ashore by paddleboarders, officials said. The pilot, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department game warden, was on a test flight Thursday afternoon when the crash occurred, officials said. He was taken to a hospital with potentially serious injuries, medics said. I'm guessing the test flight did not yield positive results. The pilot reported mechanical issues. Well, I'm guessing that the test flight was, that's why we have test flights. Pilot reported mechanical issues and was forced to land in the lake, a Texas Parks and Wildlife spokesperson said. The plane had just come out of routine maintenance and they left out a bolt. Sorry. A bystander, Nicholas Compton, told Austin TV station KXAN that he heard a paddleboarder yell that a plane had landed in the water. Compton said he then helped bring the pilot to shore. I was expecting to see something much worse than a man still alive floating, so I was very relieved that he was still conscious. So it wasn't much thinking except just getting him to the shore to medical services, Compton told the TV station. The plane was successfully removed from the water, according to a Facebook page from Texas Parks and Wildlife. If you're wondering where I got the action from, I grew up in New Mexico, right? And there's not a lot of skiing. If God wanted Texans to ski, they would have made bullshit white. So they all come to New Mexico to go skiing, and I'd be sitting there having to listen to them in line waiting for the chairlift. And, it would sort of develop that little mocking type of sound. And then their grid goes offline during one of the worst winter storms ever, and everybody around them's like, yeah, buddy. But in this case, I'm guessing the test flight was a good idea. We should test this thing after you done worked on it. And now they're going to go back. This is where the aircraft investigation folk come in. They start asking all kind of questions, poking things, and wearing them silly ties and them, they wear them thin ties, right? We wear bolo ties if we wear a tie at all. Usually our belts are made of rope. We tie all kind of knots into our belts. And then we put a big metal thing over it so you can't tell. Anyway. No distilleries in North Carolina, are there? Yeah, no. Most of our distilleries are beer. We do have one liquor spirits distillery, but New Hanover has decided to, actually heard on Morning Edition. I don't have an author for this one coming from NPR. Oh, Steve Inskeep is a host from this morning show. New Hampshire distillery makes whiskey from invasive crab species. Morning, Steve Inskeep. A great tradition of cooking is that you use what's available. How else do you suppose that snails became a French luxury food? A distillery in New Hampshire follows that tradition by making use of an invasive species, tiny green crabs. They're considered a threat to the New England ecosystem, so the distillery says the answer is to eat them. Its new whiskey has a bourbon based steeped with corn, spices, and crab. Oi. Boil them up and ferment them. Spicy hot guaranteed. That's all there is to that story, because it was just like a little burb. The bourbon is steeped with tiny green crabs considered a threat to New England's ecosystem. It's kind of like shrimp, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know why people enjoy shrimp. Do you not realize it is an insect? It is a bug. I mean, are you going to eat crickets and grasshoppers and cockroaches? Well, a shrimp is basically an underwater cockroach. Enjoy. And don't talk to me about my bacon. That's a superpower. That's an amazing superpower. All right. Oh, I'm going to save this one for after the break because I've already exceeded the FCC time limits on what it is I can do while I'm on air. So, with that in mind, see, everything's working. I don't know. I don't know what to do with myself. Anyway. Please don't go nowhere. It's the Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad. It's going to be right back after some of these messages. Right here on the Big Talker Network.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. New Hanover County Commissioners are responding after several Novant Health employees have come forward with concerns over long emergency room wait times and poor working conditions at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Current Commission Chair Julia Olson-Bozeman and Commissioner Jonathan Barfield both voted in 2020 to sell the hospital to Novant. Current Commissioner Rob Zappel voted against the sale. Olson-Bozeman releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "Absolutely the right decision. There have been long ER wait times for years." She goes on to say, if the county still owned the hospital, you would be seeing a property tax increase and we wouldn't have Port City United or any of the violence prevention initiatives. And across the river, Wilmington City Council will have a second vote on their proposed budget Tuesday night. Council took its first vote on June 7th. The city says the $251 million balanced budget prioritizes affordable housing, infrastructure improvements, and providing high-quality core services. It also includes a tax increase and an increase in parking fees. In health news, COVID-19 vaccines are now available for children ages 6 months and older. Currently, Moderna's 2-dose pediatric vaccine is available at the New Hanover County Pandemic Operations Center at 1507 Greenfield Street. The county also expects to receive the pediatric 3-dose Pfizer vaccine in the coming days. CVS and Walgreens will begin offering the vaccines at some locations beginning Tuesday. However, they do serve different age ranges. And the town of Burgaw says the 2022 Blueberry Festival was a success after a 2-year pandemic pause. Crowds of people came out to enjoy car shows, music, food, and most importantly, blueberries. Blueberries are an important economic factor in the surrounding counties, so the festival was important for local blueberry farms who provided for the event. Dozens of vendors were at the courthouse square on Saturday selling their homemade items and home-baked goods. For more on these stories, you can head over to WWAYTV3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
We need judges who serve we the people, not self-interested career politicians. This is Jenny Statting, wife of Judge Michael Statting, your conservative candidate for North Carolina Court of Appeals. Michael is a former prosecutor, sitting Republican judge, and a reservist in the United States Air Force. Michael is a lifelong public servant. That is why I'm asking you to remember to vote for Judge Michael Statting, your conservative candidate for North Carolina Court of Appeals. Paid for by the committee to elect Michael Statting. Michael Statting is a reservist for the United States Air Force. Use of job title does not imply endorsement by the Department of Air Force or the Department of Defense.
Teachers and parents, the North Carolina Symphony is here to support you as you carry on the education of your children and students. Take your kids on a free virtual field trip to the Symphony with a virtual education concert and companion student book. Go on a virtual journey to learn what makes music music with music by William Grant Still, Beethoven, Brahms, and more. Access the free video and student book with password 1932 at ncsymphony.org/virtual.
Enjoying Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
Hey, welcome back to the Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad. The BigTalker.live website. Check it out, peruse the content, schedule of content, all this stuff you can replay at your fingertips. It's amazing, you'll love it, it's a way of life. Click. Oh, look at that, that's cool. Alright, we do have another story before we start getting into some of the other, well, we'll see what happens. This one coming out of Yahoo. No author. Okay, I need coffee. Hang on. All right, more than 20% of parents don't plan to talk to their kids about sex at all. Well, that's not going to bode well for our future, is it? Holy cow. Now, in some cases, I guess that would be a blessing. In my own case, my dad being a doctor, he decided to use the lifestyle of a chicken to teach me about the birds and the bees, I guess. And, well, imagine my surprise when I never saw the egg. 6 in 10 American parents were raised thinking sex was taboo. 60%. Man, that's ridiculous. A recent one poll survey asked 2,000 parents of children ages 5 to 18 to examine their own views about sex, including how they've addressed the topic with their kids. 58% of respondents have already spoken to their children about sex, and 21% plan to do so in the future. However, the same percentage, 21%, don't plan to bring up the sex talk at all. Surprisingly, 58% of parents whose kids are 10 to 13 and 57% of kids 5 to 9 have given them the birds and the bees talk. Half of parents of children ages 4 and under also had those conversations with them. That's in 51%. Interestingly, men were more likely to discuss sex with their kids than women, 61 versus 56%. Of the 42% of parents who haven't talked to their kids about sex, 37% cited their child's young age as the main reason. See, this is right here is like how much difference there is in America, what we're willing to do, and, well, anyway. 35% reported that their kids are learning sex education in school. 26% said the other parent is taking the lead. 1 in 4 admitted they would feel awkward while having those conversations about sex with their children. Regardless of those feelings, 7 in 10 of all parents agree the birds and the bees talk should happen at an early age, specifically because of how often kids are exposed to similar topics on social media and in other parts of daily life. Dr. Sarah C. Flowers, Vice President of Education and Training at Planned Parenthood Federation of America, encourages parents or caregivers to keep having ongoing conversations about sex rather than just having one talk to educate them. These conversations are not one and done. They should start early and keep happening as kids change and grow, she told Southwest News. For younger kids, this looks like knowing the correct names for all the body parts. As kids grow up, they begin to understand what those body parts do. Sex education happens in building blocks, just like math. We start by learning the basics, like numbers and counting. And over time, the conversations build up to more complex subjects like calculus. Good parallel. Respondents were also asked if their parents had educated them about sex when they were younger. Nearly half said they received some form of the sex talk, but another 30% never broached the subject. 27% of responders said the parents avoided talking to them about sex because they were too young. Now, as parents themselves, respondents are trying to be more approachable to their kids. 7 in 10 say they want their children to feel comfortable discussing anything with them, even if it's about sex education. A great place to begin is creating a safer place for these conversations at home, Flowers added. The most important thing to remember is what you want your kid to get out of the conversation with you. For most parents and caregivers, we want our kids to feel comfortable coming to us with questions and feel confident that their questions will be met with support and honesty, not shame and judgment. True dat. And now we have arguments where we don't want a sex education in school, but if they're not going to learn it at home, they're not going to learn it at school. I think, now what's interesting, like it or not, humans are mammals or animals. And I don't think there's a single animal on the planet that needed to be taught sex. It just kind of, it's like figuring out how to plug something into a socket in the wall. You know where the bits go. You got one, I got one. They kind of go like, okay. It's instinct? I don't know. But certainly the subject of biology and the impacts of this, right? Because in a lot of places, overpopulation is attributed to being the only free entertainment, the only free escape or affordable hobby, right? So people just go around bonking each other indiscriminately and without the biological information or, because at the time, you don't notice for a month or two. And some women, they can be, they will know almost immediately. And some, it might be, after missing a couple of check-ins with Aunt Flo, but, and then they realize, uh-oh. So that little time delay, right, sort of really messes with people. And if you're in a super impoverished neighborhood, and that is the only way, that you can't afford the drugs. You can't go to a movie, right? You can't afford art supplies. You can't go to a concert. I mean, you're just in a, like a favela or some noise. That the only entertainment, the only release, I guess, would be another appropriate term. So yeah, some education into the biology of it, certainly in more socioeconomically depressed areas. And teach them about it from a scientific point of view, not necessarily using the chicken's life cycle, but the, human life cycle. I think part of that sex education should include, the entire class, right? Each class in sex education should be like 5 hours long. and it should have Teletubbies and Rugrats and whatever popular cartoons and kid shows, annoying kid shows, are rolling in the background, along with a soundtrack of, crying, screaming baby and the smell of baby poop everywhere. Sort of set the mood for them, right? So if you're going to teach them about sex, and the biology of how the spermatozoa and the egg will fertilize and start dividing in nature's magic dance, each cell dividing rapidly until the parasite grows large enough to abandon its host and begin leaching from exterior. Education is important. Now, the way parents are going to teach it is going to be lensed, right? It's going to be filtered through whatever rose-colored glasses that family espouses. It could be religious. It could be... Usually, that's the one. I mean, my dad was a doctor. Didn't have, I don't remember him going to church except like when he had to. I just don't remember it. Sunday was like, leave dad alone. So, there was absolutely nothing religious or spiritual included in my conversation. Mom really didn't do much about it except use words like, oh, my handsome boy. Right? I mean, but what's that going to do to a 9-year-old? A 9-year-old's like, okay. What's that going to do for me? Apparently not much. Why not? Let's see if we have any new stuff. Oh, no, I'm not even going there. Those are just horrible human beings all the way around. Hominis Americanus. This is... Because of TMZ, stupid people are being made famous, and it should stop. I'm looking for the really stupid people, but... all of these people were just stupid. Oi. Why? Okay, never mind. A football player with a massive full-body tattoo all the way down to his... Never mind. And it looks like something out of Skynet. Pretty awesome, actually. But still massive. Oh, no. Sorry. I'm trying to field a couple of questions here, and no, one of them I'm just not going to play with. Huh. This is interesting. All right, let's have some fun. June 20, yesterday, 2022. The Dave Chappelle Theater unveiling a dedication ceremony at the Duke Ellington School of the Arts. Check this out. Wow. Dave Chappelle's alma mater is paying tribute to him by renaming a building in his honor just months after he got heckled on campus during the transgender controversy. Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C. is set to rename its performance theater after its most noted alumni. The school says it's honoring Dave because of his ongoing commitment and service to the school. See, yeah, at least he's getting merit for helping. Okay, look, all right. As we reported, Dave paid a visit to his old high school back in November while he was taking heat for his jokes about the transgender community. Things got heated when he invited students who disagreed To speak during an assembly, one student stepped up and called him a bigot, adding, "I'm 16 and I think you're childish." Some students wanted the school to reverse its decision over the naming of the building after him. Dave challenged both his supporters and his opponents, asking both sides to raise money for the school, and if the opponents raised more money, he'd gladly forego the honor of having the building renamed. As it turns out, his supporters raised the most money, so the building will be called the Dave Chappelle Theater. Ha! Boom! But that's sort of a meritocracy thing, right? Where as much as it's kind of like having tenure at a university, that there's a level of safety where they recognize your importance to the craft, to the science, to the whatever. That being a little bit on the edge might stir up the hornet's nest, but his support of the school itself is still there. You know what I'm saying? He's still supporting the school, and that's what the school's concerned about. You can talk about, you can make all the gay jokes you want, but if your heart is still supporting the very school that started you, then the school itself is going to honor that. And the fact that you're going to be controversial is actually what helps your career. I mean, when David Bowie kissed Mick Ronson on stage back in, 71 or 72 here in America, America flipped out. Half of those shows got canceled. The other shows, sold out instantly, and more shows were added in the cities that didn't have a problem with it. Bowie became overnight famous. Bigger than he was already when he started the tour. So, and you can't argue the material. I mean, I don't know if I've seen the actual, I saw a couple of the jokes, and I'm like, you know what? Part of it is right. The hijacking of our language needs to stop. Right? The rainbow is not yours. Gay is not yours exclusively. Right? I mean, you can use Tweety Bird or you can use a rainbow or whatever you want as a representation. And you can use terms even if they've been hijacked from the rest of society. For example, the term gay has been around for centuries. Don we now our gay apparel. And now you're going to hijack it. And the thing was, the original term of gay had been used by the greater society, everybody, right? Regardless of sexual orientation or preference, everybody used the word gay to refer to something that was a little less than industrial strength. Right? You can have an assault rifle or you can have a gay little pistol. But you can't do that now. I mean, I'm sure somebody's going to call into my boss and say, hey, he made a gay joke. I didn't. What I'm pointing out is that the word gay has been hijacked to be a, militantly defended term for a particular section of the community to which not everybody ascribes. And to try and convince me that my language or my understanding of the rainbow, which is scientific in nature, involves refraction of light and an angle of 42 degrees. It's an amazing relationship that yields this awesome light show. It, to me, in no way represents what it is you're trying to say. It's fine for you to do that, but don't try to say that the rainbow is yours. It's not. It's not like the river is anyone's, it's just relax. And if you are so sensitive that a joke about who and what you are and do gets you that upset, then obviously you're not okay with where you are, if that makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, we make horrible, well, not me. Well, okay, maybe I do. Horrible jokes have been made about political and Hollywood leaders forever, right? And these people have to develop a thick enough skin to say, you know what, that's not going to bother me. Right? Do you remember the roasts back in the 70s and early 80s? I mean, you get Don Rickles up there, and he would just roast you like a chestnut. And we laughed. I mean, Flava Flav, holy dude, man. They tore that guy apart. And he laughed through the whole thing, right? Because they trape out every mistake you've ever made and just roast. Brutally roast. And now we can't even make a reference without causing some sort of international incident. And it's things like that that have gone too far to the point that we can't have humor in our lives anymore, except in select groups. What can be considered locker room or industrial talk. And I think that's doing a disservice to who we are, because if we can't laugh at ourselves, then we have removed 90% of what it is to be a human. Because let's face it, we're funny. Especially when we get all up in tights about something that's not even that important in some cases. Most cases. Myself, I don't care what you smoke or what you poke. Not my concern. My concern is when you get out of hand when I make a joke and you take it personally. The fact that you take it personally is indicative that you are not okay with who you are, where you're at, and what's going on. You need to get right with yourself. Right? People make jokes about my being a long-haired musician and all that. Man, go ahead. Right? When Dan was on the show a couple weeks ago and discovered that being bald was a walking sexual harassment suit, he just laughed at it, right? I mean, when was the last time you heard a Oriental guy get upset after hearing an Oriental joke? They know that the joke is more about the person telling it. So being offended by it is ludicrous. It's silly. It's a waste of energy, right? But we're using it as a political saber to try and slice through the rest of our common sense, shredding the entire sense of social decency into mounds of trash on the floor. What's that about? If you can't laugh at yourself, you're not in the right spot. That's as simple as that. Not to be confused with bullying. Because bullying is a direct attack on an individual. Maybe even on a group. But making a joke about a, stereotypical lifestyle. What's interesting is we can do it to ourselves if we're in the group. For example, black people can make black jokes without being offended. Gay people can make gay jokes without being offensive. I can make cracker jokes without being offensive, I guess. I don't know. That part of it is so confusing, but until there's some sort of, understanding at a social level, that until it's personal, it's harmless. Just like a gun. Just like a joke. Just like a TV show. And if you're going after somebody and you have your facts together, right? That whole Theranos, what was that girl's name? They were not kind to her in that production whatsoever. But the research was solid. The information was solid. Totally legit. But attacking someone and saying that they are incapable just because of a lifestyle choice or whatever, that's different. That's absolutely uncalled for. But, by the same token, if you're trying to claim gender fluidity, you have an X or a Y chromosome, and that is going to affect your treatment. At some point, you're going to have to at least be honest with yourself and say, yeah, this muscle tissue started out XX or XY. And I have to, at some point, honor that. No matter what makeup I put on top, no matter what socks I put on the bottom, I still have to honor the fact that the internal bits of me still run on an XY system. No matter how much I want that to be different. Confusing those two, confusing your importance and your agenda with the issues in my life, that's where we start overreaching our right to opinion. You can disagree, you can agree, whatever. You can do whatever you want. I don't care. As Frank Zappa put it, the most important thing about living your life is not to interfere with anyone else's life. That's the rule. Do what you like, just don't interfere with anybody else and don't tell them what they can and cannot do. And if you're going to do stuff that's, well, personal, keep it personal. Put it behind the doors, right? That's fine. I mean, kissing in public doesn't bother me necessarily. Right? I mean, I remember seeing it as a young boy, young child, younger. And we were in Providence. No, where were we? Provincetown, Massachusetts. And, yeah, I saw a couple in love, and it was weird seeing two mustaches intertwine. And that was about all it took. From that point on, it was like, you know what? Not my... Doesn't bother me. A little weird to see. But otherwise, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't bother me. But the fact that I can't make jokes about various aspects of all these different lifestyles, right? The ones wearing bling, the one that have to put LED lights on their car, right? I was raised that your car is not an extension of your ego. Your car is basically a utilitarian device to get you from A to B. And the finances, the resources allocated to this device are going to be, should be based more on reliability and serviceability more so than bling and bing and jacked up tires and whatever else. None of that made sense to me. So, having an opinion is one thing, being able to do something about it is another. Oh, baby. Thank you for saving me there, Mr. Music Guy. Tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, the Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad. I'll be right back.
Keeping Whiteville informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
Join Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
My name is Brian Wilson. I'm running for District Court Judge. During my lifetime, I've gone from protecting your God-given and constitutional freedoms as a combat vet of the U.S. military to working locally as a carpenter building homes while I worked my way through college. For the past 17 years, I've been protecting and defending your constitutional rights in the courtroom. I'm currently protecting our rights of our most vulnerable, our children, as the guardian ad litem attorney advocate for the children of Brunswick, Columbus, and Bladen County. I've spent my career serving our country, our state, and our communities, so I ask that you continue your confidence by voting for me, Brian Wilson, in the primary elections on May 17th. Thank you.
I am State Farm Agent Rob Renz, and I want to help you get to a better place. Visit us online at ilminsurance.com. That's ilminsurance.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. New Hanover County Commissioners are responding after several Novant Health employees have come forward with concerns over long emergency room wait times and poor working conditions at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Current Commission Chair Julia Olson-Bozeman and Commissioner Jonathan Barfield both voted in 2020 to sell the hospital to Novant. Current Commissioner Rob Zappel voted against the sale. Olson-Bozeman releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "Absolutely the right decision. There have been long ER wait times for years." She goes on to say, if the county still owned the hospital, you would be seeing a property tax increase and we wouldn't have Port City United or any of the violence prevention initiatives. And across the river, Wilmington City Council will have a second vote on their proposed budget Tuesday night. Council took its first vote on June 7th. The city says the $251 million balanced budget prioritizes affordable housing, infrastructure improvements, and providing high-quality core services. It also includes a tax increase and an increase in parking fees. In health news, COVID-19 vaccines are now available for children ages 6 months and older. Currently, Moderna's 2-dose pediatric vaccine is available at the New Hanover County Pandemic Operations Center at 1507 Greenfield Street. The county also expects to receive the pediatric 3-dose Pfizer vaccine in the coming days. CVS and Walgreens will begin offering the vaccines at some locations beginning Tuesday. However, they do serve different age ranges. And the town of Burgaw says the 2022 Blueberry Festival was a success after a 2-year pandemic pause. Crowds of people came out to enjoy car shows, music, food, and most importantly, blueberries. Blueberries are an important economic factor in the surrounding counties, so the festival was important for local blueberry farms who provided for the event. Dozens of vendors were at the courthouse square on Saturday selling their homemade items and home-baked goods. For more on these stories, you can head over to wwaytv3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Hey, I'm Yael Osowski.
And I'm David Clement.
We're the host of Consumer Choice Radio, broadcasting every Saturday at 10 a.m. here on the Big Talker 106.7 FM.
Consumer Choice Radio is a weekly conversation featuring the latest news, interviews, and expert analysis that covers consumer topics from around the world.
ConsumerChoiceRadio.com.
The Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association serves as the advocate for the building industry, advancing professionalism and promoting community involvement. We are a positive force for responsible growth while protecting property rights and the privilege of home ownership. 3 out of every 5 jobs is touched in some manner by construction in our region. Growth generates jobs, maintains our property values, and builds and updates our infrastructure. Join us Friday mornings for the Construction Connection with the Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association and the Big Talker FM.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh, local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
Enjoying Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to program whenever you want, however you want by asking for Big Talker.
Hey, welcome back to the Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad, right here on the Big Talker Network, BigTalker.live. Peruse our schedule of content right there on the Big Talker website. You can use the Listen Live tab anytime you feel the need to listen to us live. If you pair... Oh, wait a minute. Back up. We got an app for the Android and iOS devices. Download it for your favorite piece. If you Bluetooth pair it with your car's entertainment center, you can drive around anywhere live takes you while enjoying the Asylum and other content on the Big Talker Network. In fact, you can get to any of our shows, past or present, using the app because it's all right there. Audio, video, all that good stuff. It's amazing. Yael Osowski of Consumer Choice Radio, Consumer Choice Center, did an amazing job putting that together, and definitely a shout out for that. So, all right, let's get on with the show. We got 4 seconds? Okay, hush. It worked. It listened. I don't know what to do now. Completely shocked. I do know in about 20 minutes we're going to be joined by our friend Justin Humphries of the Humphries Law Firm, helping me understand what a grand jury is about. I got a 5-year-old doing zoomies down the hallway. The grand jury's duty is to hear the evidence on behalf of the state and to return a true bill of indictment if the grand jury finds from the evidence that there is probable cause for the charge made. That's the Grand Juror Handbook, the North Carolina Judicial Branch, part of nccourts.gov. Mission of the North Carolina Judicial Branch, just to remind you, is to protect and preserve the rights and liberties of all the people as guaranteed by the Constitution and laws of the United States and North Carolina by providing a fair, independent, and accessible forum for the just, timely, and economical resolution of their legal affairs. Just want to say that the story of Gen X broke 5 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, maybe there's a new meaning to the word timely, of which I was previously unaware. And this is what you get when you're selected. Oh, look, I can do it as a PDF. I'm going to do that. That's far more cool. Let's do desktop. Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like that idea. We're going to open up this here PDF. And there's a letter from the Chief Justice. And I think it bears, you know, it's important. I think it should be pointed out, brought to attention. Let me get back down to it. I had to scramble around on my machine here. A message from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of North Carolina, dear grand juror. On behalf of the North Carolina Judicial Branch, congratulations on being selected for grand jury service. Grand jurors are a fundamental part of the American judicial system and a time-tested method of ensuring fairness and impartiality in our courts. The grand jury is one of the ways that our democracy preserves the rule of law, so your participation is of great significance! Exclamation point. For most citizens, grand jury service is the only time that they will interact with their courts. To help you prepare for this important responsibility, the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts has created this handbook as a guide for questions that you may have. We hope that you find it helpful. When you have completed your grand jury service, please return this handbook so that it may be used again by future grand jurors. Because God knows if we spend tax money on this. Anyway. Again, thank you for your commitment to our courts and this important civic duty. I hope that you will find it to be a positive experience of which you can be proud. Your participation helps ensure our courts effectuate justice in a timely, fair, and unbiased manner. The table of contents include the purpose of this handbook, origin and history of the grand jury, selection, term of service, appointment, and duties of four-person functions, including bills of indictment, presentments, inspection of jails and other facilities, hearing witnesses, passing on bills of indictment, secrecy, practical suggestions, investigative grand jury. Appendices include sample grand jury report, sample indictment form, oaths, and jail inspection checklist. Does this continue on page 2? No. The purpose of this handbook, the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 24 of the North Carolina Constitution, provide a person charged with a crime the right to a trial by a jury. This handbook will acquaint persons who have been selected to serve on a North Carolina grand jury with the general nature and importance of their role as grand jurors. It offers some suggestions helpful to them in performing this important public service. The handbook is not intended to state the principles of law that govern persons serving on a state grand jury. The judge presiding in the court will give the jury instructions. Grand jurors should rely on those instructions for guidance as to the laws governing their work. So you get something of a introduction, right? I mean, this is the equivalent of your fast food orientation. But otherwise, you're like just thrown into the fire and left to your own devices, which is fine most of the time. But this is somebody's life you're messing with. Well, what's interesting is they're saying that the grand jury, a jury is for a person. I'm guessing a grand jury is for a company or a group or some such noise. I could be wrong, because I am not a lawyer. But I find it interesting that the handbook starts out there by explaining that a jury is to try a person, but a grand jury is the next sentence. Which one is it, brah? In the case of Chemours, we're going after a person. I mean, in the case of Chemours, we're not going after a person. Sorry, I'm still distracted. Let's see. Oh, the origin and history of the grand jury might answer some of those questions. Hopefully it's only the one page, because I'm not much on history. Until it bites me in the ass, and then, of course, I'm all about it. Oh, wait, that's an American trait, not just me. Just throwing that out there. The grand jury has a long and honorable tradition. It was recognized in the Magna Carta, the first English constitutional document, which King John granted in 1215 at the demand of his subjects. Almost democratic in nature. The first English grand jury consisted of 12 men selected from the knights or other freemen. These grand jurors were summoned to inquire into crimes alleged to have been committed in their local community. Thus, originally they functioned as accusers or witnesses rather than as important fact-finders. The guiding principle of our modern grand jury developed in England. Over many years, grand jury proceedings became secret, and the grand jury became independent of the Crown. As a result, a grand jury was expected to vote for or against an indictment as it deemed proper without regard to the recommendations of the judge, prosecutor, or any other person. This independence of action was achieved only after a long struggle over many years. Yeah, I've heard that phrase before. When the English colonists came to America, they brought with them many institutions of the English legal system, including the grand jury. The English tradition of the grand jury was well established in the American colonies long before the American Revolution. Indeed, the colonists used it as a platform to assert their independence from the pressure of colonial governors. In 1735, for example, the colonial governor of New York demanded that a grand jury indict for libel John Zinger, editor of the newspaper called the Weekly Journal, because he had held up to scorn certain acts of the royal governor. The grand jury refused. The grand jury as an institution was so firmly established in the traditions of our forebears that they included it in the Bill of Rights. The Fifth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States provides in part that no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. Article 1, Section 22 of North Carolina's Constitution provides that, except in misdemeanor cases initiated in the District Court Division, no person shall be put to answer any criminal charge but by indictment, presentment, or impeachment. But any person may waive indictment in non-capital cases. I'm not any closer to understanding what the hell this is about, but it does make a bit more sense. Now, the fact that we brought this over from England with us doesn't necessarily fill me with good feelings of warm fuzzy. It's not like you're making a good case for yourself here. But the fact that it's secret is sort of what bothers, in some ways, kind of bothers me. Here they go through the functions and the different roles, like the foreperson and the regular people, the terms of the service. During those 12 months, service on a grand jury lasts approximately 12 months. A meeting can be called only when the court is in session. Grand jury continues from day to day until all pending business has been completed. And then it adjourns until its next regular time to convene, unless it is called back by its foreperson. As a practical matter, this means that service on the grand jury will probably require only a few days of time during the 12 months, but more or less time may be required depending on the workload in the particular county. In any county, the senior judge for the judicial district in which the county is located may reduce the length of service to 6 months. In such cases, 9 new members are chosen every 3 months. I mean, there's a lot in the mechanics, the minutiae, the everything else. The foreperson functions. Presentments. Grand jury in North Carolina is not restricted to considering bills of indictment presented by the district attorney, although that is the usual way a grand jury does its work. It may also consider an offense brought to its attention by the presiding judge or district attorney, as well as any offense which comes to its attention in the course of an investigation of other matters or from the personal knowledge of its own members. At least 12 members would have to concur to investigate an offense not requested by the judge or district attorney. The judge or district attorney must approve the calling of any witness to investigate such matters. Bills of indictment. A grand jury's primary duty to investigate and pass upon such bills of indictment as may be given to it by the district attorney. A bill of indictment is simply a written accusation charging a person with the commission of one or more criminal offenses. The district attorney will prepare these bills and enter upon each bill the names of the witnesses needed to be heard on behalf of the state. A sample bill of indictment form is included in the appendices of this handbook, if you don't have one already. It is not the duty of the grand jury to determine whether the defendant named in the bill of indictment is guilty or innocent of the charge in the bill of indictment. Determination of guilt or innocence is the responsibility of a trial by jury, also called the petite jury, in the presence of the court where the defendant is present and may be heard. The grand jury's duty is to hear evidence on behalf of the state and to return a true bill of indictment if the grand jury finds from the evidence that there is probable cause for the charge made. In the alternative, the grand jury must return a bill submitted by the district attorney as a not true bill of indictment if the grand jury fails to find probable cause for the charge made. At least 12 members of the grand jury must concur in returning a true bill of indictment. That is, the crime named in the bill under the consideration has probably been committed and that there is probable cause to believe that the defendant committed that crime. Probable cause is a reasonable suspicion supported by circumstances sufficiently strong to warrant a cautious person to believe that the person accused is guilty of the offense charged. To pass on a bill of indictment, only 2 questions need to be answered. First, was the crime probably committed? And second, did the defendant probably commit that crime? Here's where I'm about to lose my stuff, all right? 2 questions, only 2 questions to pass on a bill of indictment. I'm going to do this whole ending one more time for the people in the back. To pass on a bill of indictment, only 2 questions need to be answered. First, was a crime probably committed? Yes. Poisoning a public waterway is a crime. If you don't believe me, you can go to the DEQ's website, Department of Environmental Quality of North Carolina, and you can see cases where they went after like mom and pop for using centuries-old, expired, now illegal pesticides and stuff in their garden. And we'll find them and we'll throw them in jail. Another couple of guys, right, trying to scam some bucks off of industrial waste, taking fuel-spoiled or fuel-tainted soil, scraping it off of one place and dump it in somebody else's land, only to find out that they're poisoning a marsh area, right? So those guys got busted. So, obviously it's illegal to damage the ecosystem, our ecosystem, our environment. And Chemours has been doing that for 40 years. And the second question, did the defendant probably commit that crime? By their own admission. It's been proven beyond any reasonable doubt, any shadow of doubt, that Chemours has been responsible for the poisoning of the Cape Fear River, the watershed, and the air for decades. So what about these two questions was not answered during the grand jury investigation into Chemours just a couple short, 4 years ago, 5 years ago? What happened? That's what I want to know. Don't you? That's why we're going to have Justin Humphries here in about 5 minutes to help us unwrap. Let's ask one more question of Mr. Google here. How much does let's make sure, federal grand jury cost? Just the jurors are paid $50 a day, up to $60 if they're paid after serving 45 days, and also reimbursed for reasonable transportation expenses and parking. I don't care about the jurors. I want to see how much the investigation cost. How much does a grand jury, how much does a federal grand jury? You're not helping. Like, do you have that friend whenever you ask them a question, you get too much information, and it's like, wait a minute, I need to narrow this down a little bit more. See, there's all kinds of other information. Well, anyway, it would be interesting to know, and seeing as how the grand jury itself is secret, everything about it is going to be secret, including the amount of your money they pissed away during the investigation. And to learn more about that, we're going to be joined by Justin Humphries after the break. So, yeah, that's right. The Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad, will be right back after this. So please, don't go nowhere.
Hello, I'm Matt Bennett with WWAY News. New Hanover County Commissioners are responding after several Novant Health employees have come forward with concerns over long emergency room wait times and poor working conditions at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Current Commission Chair Julia Olson-Bozeman and Commissioner Jonathan Barfield both voted in 2020 to sell the hospital to Novant. Current Commissioner Rob Zappel voted against the sale. Olson-Bozeman releasing a statement saying in part, quote, "Absolutely the right decision. There have been long ER wait times for years." She goes on to say, if the county still owned the hospital, you would be seeing a property tax increase and we wouldn't have Port City United or any of the violence prevention initiatives. And across the river, Wilmington City Council will have a second vote on their proposed budget Tuesday night. Council took its first vote on June 7th. The city says the $251 million balanced budget prioritizes affordable housing, infrastructure improvements, and providing high-quality core services. It also includes a tax increase and an increase in parking fees. In health news, COVID-19 vaccines are now available for children ages 6 months and older. Currently, Moderna's 2-dose pediatric vaccine is available at the New Hanover County Pandemic Operations Center at 1507 Greenfield Street. The county also expects to receive the pediatric 3-dose Pfizer vaccine in the coming days. CVS and Walgreens will begin offering the vaccines at some locations beginning Tuesday. However, they do serve different age ranges. And the town of Burgaw says the 2022 Blueberry Festival was a success after a 2-year pandemic pause. crowds of people came out to enjoy car shows, music, food, and most importantly, blueberries. Blueberries are an important economic factor in the surrounding counties, so the festival was important for local blueberry farms who provided for the event. Dozens of vendors were at the courthouse square on Saturday selling their homemade items and home-baked goods. For more on these stories, you can head over to wwaytv3.com. I'm Matt Bennett. Have a great day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm WWAY meteorologist Ramel Carpenter with your Storm Track 3 forecast. Get ready for a nice first day of summer as our temperatures climb into the upper 80s and the lower 90s away from the coast. Coastal areas will get into the middle and upper 80s this afternoon. We will be seeing our fair share of high clouds, but some sunshine in store for us throughout the day today. As we head towards the overnight hours, our temperatures are dropping down into the upper 60s and the lower 70s, remaining mild under partly cloudy skies. Get your full forecast on WWAY and WWAYTV3.com.
This news and weather is brought to you by Two Men and a Truck. For your free quote, go to twomenandatruck.com. twomenandatruck.com.
Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, located at 8210 River Road, Southport, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, with the Tackle Box open Monday through Saturday, 7 to 6. Marine Service Pro is a full Suzuki and Tohatsu dealership. They deal in pre-owned boats, full service and repair, with certified technicians in all engines, and fiberglass specialists. The Tackle Box offers fresh, local seafood, live bait, a tackle shop, and fish packing and shipping. They also offer a full-service U-Haul dealership. Spend time with Leon or Jenny for one-stop shopping at Marine Service Pro and the Tackle Box Seafood, 8210 River Road, Southport.
Enjoying Big Talker Network is as easy as asking for it. Program your digital home assistants such as Google Home, Alexa, and Siri to stream Big Talker Network content by simple voice command. Enjoy convenient hands-free access to program whenever you want, however you want, by asking for Big Talker.
Hey, welcome back to the Asylum, your refuge in a world gone mad. Don't forget the Big Talker website, bigtalker.live. Use the Listen Live tab. Download the app for Android and iOS devices. You'll love it. It's a way of life. You can pair it with your car's entertainment center and system and actually take the Big Talker anywhere and everywhere you want to be. Now, as promised, our friend Mr. Justin Humphries of the Humphries Law Firm is here to help us sort of understand what a grand jury is about, what it costs, what's involved, and why it didn't work. Good morning, Justin. How you doing?
Oh, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, good to have you, man. Been a minute.
Yeah, no doubt. I miss being on the Big Talker.
We'll have you back, I promise. We're working on it.
All right, great.
But I thank you for taking my question a couple weeks ago about the, what's in a grand jury and specifically the Chemours grand jury and why it failed when I understand there are only two questions that need to be answered. One is, was there a crime? And two, was there probably a crime? And two, is the person being accused probably the one who did it? Am I missing something here?
Well, sort of. So you've got the general gist of it right, that the function of a grand jury is to decide whether there's probable cause to bring a criminal charge against a person, or I believe in the case of the Chemours situation, against a company. And so the process is one-sided. Essentially, the government or the state is going to put on its evidence. The defendants cannot put on countering or rebuttal evidence. So the question is just, if everything that the government has to say is true, have they established that there's probable cause to charge the defendant with a crime?
Okay, and maybe it's just me, but does a confession qualify?
A confession, sure. So if a company confesses to, or a person confesses to the crime, presuming that the confession was lawfully obtained, then that would certainly be evidence that could be presented to the grand jury.
At one point, Chemours, I think they were still DuPont at the time, and this is per conversations with Mr. Cahoon, one of the Cape Fear River Watch board members involved in the lawsuit with Chemours to try and hold them accountable for this. Even as the water rates for CFPUA go up to compensate for the hardware necessary to compensate for the toxins that were released into our waterways, had actually confessed and said, we've been doing a bad thing for a while. We're pretty sure we did it, and we're pretty sure we're responsible. Sorry. So I'm trying to figure out if that would be a confession that would be usable in this case.
Well, there's a few things to unpack there. With respect to, the context of a lawsuit, that's going to be a civil standard.
Which is what they had to do after the grand jury failed. So I'm trying to figure out.
So, yes, and with respect to the grand jury, that was a federal grand jury. And so they were looking at the issue of whether Chemours violated the Clean Water Act, which is a federal law.
Okay.
And so the standard for that is, did someone unlawfully discharge a pollutant into the navigable waters?
Okay. Even he's upset about it. I mean, the whole idea is a little upsetting. But we do have that crime.
Sorry about that.
Not at all.
Navigable waters are defined as waters that can facilitate interstate commerce.
Okay.
So, for example, the Intercoastal Waterway is a navigable body of water. In this case, the Cape Fear River is a navigable body of water because it can facilitate travel or commerce between multiple states.
Fair.
So, and then there's a caveat to the Clean Water Act that says, unless permitted.
Okay.
And as I understand the issue with Gen X and Chemours and the chemicals that were discharged into the Cape Fear River, the problem with both civil and criminal liability is the permits that DuPont and later Chemours had to conduct the activity they were doing.
Okay.
I think the issue is what they were originally doing was legal, but they didn't understand the effects it could potentially have on people's health.
All right. So we're sort of permitting what we don't understand, and we're sort of responsible for it ourselves.
Well, I wouldn't say we're personally responsible. I think the problem is that in the late 70s, without a great understanding of what was going on, the activity was approved for DuPont. And it came to light further down the road that this activity had negative consequences on our health. And that's, that's kind of a story that's as old as time, people thought things were, like lead-based paint.
It was the best thing since sliced bread, and then we turned out it's not as good as sliced bread.
Exactly. DDT, it's a lot of situations like that. But
once it was discovered, because I think the grand jury was convened after the story broke in 2017 by Star News. So the confession and a lot of the permitting was previous to all of that. But they continued, and still to this day have continued to have toxins in their effluents and their air discharges.
Yep. And so that's the second kind of piece of the issue is with the permit. The North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality has issued a non-compliance notice with the permit.
That's like sending a letter saying how mad you are?
Well, no, not exactly. So what that is that's saying, we issued you this permit, and in order to keep your permit, you're going to have to take corrective action to stop the problem. And so Chemours put forth a plan of what they're going to do. And I don't know if you've seen those commercials that they run with the guy in the lab coat, and he says, we've got it to where it's only going to be 99%. It's going to be 99% free of pollutants. It's like, well, wait a minute. Who wants this 1% of pollutants? But so Chemours issued a plan to correct kind of the environmental problems that are going on, and the North Carolina regulatory body, D&Q, said that the plan was inadequate. And that's kind of where things rest right now. And that's probably part of why you see that advertising campaign is they're trying to put pressure on the government to say, look, our plan is good enough. Let us keep doing it. But I think just the problem. Well, it's funny, but it's not. And I think that's why it's. They put somebody in a lab coat who seems reasonable up there, saying we're going to keep this, we're going to keep the water, or we're going to keep things 99% free. And I think that's.
Does it have the little disclaimer saying that he's not a real scientist, just a hired actor portraying a scientist?
I'm sure it is down at the bottom of the screen. That sort of thing. And I think probably some of what they're running into is they're getting, kind of fool me once type situation.
Okay.
So they got their permit in the 70s, and it pretty much, it obviously did go through. I don't know what kind of opposition it faced, but now when they're looking at taking corrective action, the government's probably going to hold them to a pretty high standard in light of what happened last time they got an approval.
Yeah, that fool me once sort of thing. Now, the part that's got a lot of people up in arms is how the testing is going, but that's a whole different set of issues. I am, I guess, a bit stunned to find that the permits are something of the sticky wicket in this entire thing. Because even though we now know it's a crime, we now know who is responsible for it, we're a little jacked up on the timeline as to when and where permits have been issued, when they were revoked, when they were held in non-compliance, which still seems to be a not very aggressive tactic in correcting untoward behavior. So I'm wondering if something in the grand jury, because to bring a grand jury together in the first place has to take a lot of time and money.
Well, it does. And so, they exist on different levels. So if you go down to the courthouse at our local state courthouse, you'll see, and this is kind of a note for anybody, if you get a jury summons for grand jury at the state level, you're going to be going once a month for a year.
Right.
And they go in there and they hear presentations from police officers and the district attorney's offices, and they're just cranking through them. And pretty much 9 times out of 10, they're going to issue an indictment or a true bill. And that's essentially the result. They found probable cause, because they're not finding that the person's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They're just giving the green light for the case to move forward before a judge or jury.
That the state has enough evidence to that they have a case.
Yes. Now, sometimes in high-profile cases, you'll see a grand jury commissioned just for that one case.
Okay.
Like, for an example, supposedly there's a grand jury commissioned in Georgia to determine whether to charge President Trump. That's something that's going on right now because it's a political issue. So the DA doesn't want to. The DA is going to get it from both ends. The people that like Trump are going to get upset with the DA if he charges them. The people that don't like Trump are going to be upset with the DA if he doesn't charge them. So a grand jury, in a way, can kind of be a scapegoat. You can say, "Look, it wasn't my decision. We
a
put
random sampling of your own people."
That's right. Well, I wouldn't put it. I would just. It's kind of passing the decision on to another body. And in a way, it can be more fair. And so in a bigger case or in high-profile cases, sometimes you see grand juries commissioned just to make a charging decision on. It can be a company. It can be an individual. There's a lot of situations where you see that happen. Another situation I bring up would be the I believe it's the Breonna Taylor situation in Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
They had the officers, they had grand juries commissioned to decide whether to charge those officers criminally. And the reason for it was because it was a high profile, politically charged on both sides. And so you probably had district attorneys that didn't want to make a political decision. So they said, well, we'll just put the evidence before a grand jury and see what they decide.
That if they want to go forward and do anything, push it, press it, whatever. That's sort of like
the grand jury is just deciding whether there's probable cause or not. And so if there's probable cause, then the case proceeds it goes through the criminal justice system. If the grand jury doesn't find adequate evidence or doesn't find probable cause, then the case stops right there, at least on a criminal level.
Okay.
So with respect to this Chemours thing, the grand jury found that there was not sufficient evidence to indict Chemours as a company. And so that was the end of the criminal case against Chemours, at least with respect to federal violations of federal law, being the Clean Water Act.
Huh. Now I'm discovering here while getting some information on closing the file on the Chemours case. According to the ncpolicywatch.org website, corporations are seldom criminally penalized for environmental violations. The most recent case in North Carolina was 2015 when Duke Energy paid a $68 million criminal fine for the Dan River coal ash disaster.
Yep.
Not only are there few corporate criminal penalties, but the number of criminal investigations is also low. According to the EPA, it opened fewer than 200 criminal investigations last year. While it is up from the previous 2 years, that figure is still half of its peak of nearly 400 in 2009. The declines also occurred during the Obama administration. Do you think politics may have played a role in how some of this is being handled?
Perhaps. And what I could say about I agree with the commentary you read about being very few criminal prosecutions against companies, because kind of the criminal prosecutions that we're all familiar with typically involve jail.
Right.
So that's the result. Somebody was drinking and driving or killed somebody or there's a million crimes. But that's kind of the way we traditionally think of crime is, someone gets arrested, and in that situation, the officer and the magistrate are the ones that are making the charging decision. The officer tells the magistrate that it witnessed a crime. Magistrate proceeds forward with the crime.
Deeming that the evidence is legitimate and everything else.
Yeah, that's kind of your traditional way it works. In the criminal context with corporations, a corporation's a legal fiction. You can't put a corporation in jail. Now, you can put officers...
You can arrest a boat, but you can't put a company in jail? I'm okay.
Well, because a company doesn't really exist as far as, like a company is an organization. So you can't say,
I get it.
Put this in jail, so everybody's got to pack up and go to jail. Now, you could say that an executive or an officer, if you identify individual wrongdoing of that person, they could go to jail. But you can't say, all right, we find the company guilty of violating the Clean Water Act, therefore the president of the company is going to serve a 10-year term. That's called vicarious liability, and it doesn't exist to the point where we're going to arrest corporate officers unless there's a finding that they participated in the wrongdoing. So the way that criminal prosecutions typically work against a company is usually it's in the regulatory context, and it involves fines to the company. Because that is something while companies don't have a physical existence, or they're not people capable of being incarcerated, many times companies own assets, have bank accounts, things of that nature.
Right.
So typically what you see in the prosecution of a company is a regulatory agency such as the EPA, the not the Coast Guard, but, you got the Environmental Crimes Division of Department of Justice. You've got, it happens in the employment context. Whoever it may be will find that the company has a practice that is unlawful and decides to issue a fine against the company. And that's typically the crime is the punishment for the crime usually involves payment of money. I can give you an example of it. Something that I'm familiar with in the environmental context is magic pipe cases. Magic pipe cases, yeah. So there's the Marpole Treaty that requires ships coming in and out of the port to produce logs of how they dealt with the water or with the oil on their ships, to make sure that no oil is being discharged into the ocean.
Oh, okay.
There's this thing. So if you Google the magic pipe is a bypass mechanism that people use for the oil water separator that essentially just pumps the dirty oil into the ocean. And so the crime is, if you use the magic pipe, the crime is entering the port and presenting false logs.
Okay.
To the port of entry.
Not the
Usually
actual discharge, but the lying about the discharge.
That's right, because the discharge is happening in international waters where there's no jurisdiction. So the crime presenting false logs to the court, or not to the court, to the port of entry. So what you'll have in those situations, the ship owner or the company usually ends up getting a very large fine. It's usually in the millions.
Wow.
Then they'll typically go after the captain and or the chief engineer on the boat. Whoever was personally responsible for discharging the oil into the ocean, they typically face individual criminal responsibility because they were the bad actor. They can prove that person had control over that ship and made the decision to pump the oil into the water. And it's not a defense that the person was told to do that by the company. Companies don't put those sort of things in policy manuals or emails. I mean, I guess it's probably happened before. But it's certainly not good practice. But the individual that did it,
the one who hit the button.
Yep. That's right. So that's an example of kind of how these situations work. Since you can't imprison the company ends up paying a big fine. And that's kind of like what happened with Duke Energy with the coal ash situation. They had to pay a big fine, and it was most likely to the state is who, because it was in lieu of that was their punishment for the crime, was the fine by the state.
Since there's, back up a few months, I guess it's been a month or two now. I heard about a ship being arrested, and of course, just mentally that just sort of, conjured up a ludicrous nature. But the fact that it's... Sorry?
Did you say a ship was arrested?
Yeah.
Yep.
And that, so when I hear that a company can't go to jail, I'm thinking, wait a minute, if we can arrest a ship, I'm sure we can twist our vision to include arresting a company. But if all we have is a financial recourse, it's even more nauseating that the CEO made $9 million in bonus on $1 million salary and yet they have no interest in reimbursing the $30 million in the the activated charcoal filter system that had to be added to the Sweeney water plant to get rid of that last 1%.
Yeah. Well, a couple things on that. So a ship, that's not going to be a company. That's going to be an asset. And that's something that it's kind of along the same lines as...
it's more a seizure than an arrest.
Yeah. Well, you're seizing an asset.
So that's why I was like, why are you using the word arrest? I don't...
It's a admiralty law type term, but essentially what you're doing is when you arrest a vessel, you're holding the vessel as security for some kind of case. So a lot of times, like, in these magic pipe situations, they arrest the vessel and then part of the company's process of getting their boat back is paying their fine.
Okay, because the boat itself was actually the criminal in the case, whether somebody pushed the button and made the boat poop oil into the water. The boat itself is...
It's not. It's a couple things. It's the evidence and it's the collateral to secure getting paid, because those are the two areas where that can happen.
Okay.
Because if you look at it, if it's a foreign company, how are you going to punish them?
Right. When they leave, how are they? You're not going after them. I mean, and they're not coming back.
They could just decide we're done going to America. So, but if you've got their boat, at least you could sell that, and that could be a fine.
Okay.
So that can be a way of almost of collateralizing the potential criminal fine.
Okay. But the terms themselves just seem weird. And wasn't there a time when they were referring to corporations as individuals and would have individual rights?
Yeah, and that's kind of a disputed area as far as to what extent do corporations have rights.
Right.
A corporation, again, it's a legal fiction, so it's not a walking, breathing thing.
It's more a gestalt.
Yeah, it's a collection. It's like it's meant to be a tool to encourage business investment. It's like we're going to put our money, we're going to pool it into this corporation, and if the corporation fails, all we've lost is what we've invested into the corporation. It's a way of separating business investment from yourself.
Right.
I guess would be a way of putting it.
Which is the whole reason for having an LLC, so that you can protect your personal assets from your professional assets.
Yeah, that's right. Now, one of the things about that situation is having an LLC is not going to protect you from your own negligence. Meaning,
right.
Like, let's say, you're a roofer and you've got an LLC and you contract to replace somebody's roof. Well, if you build it incorrectly and a bunch of rain gets in and ruins somebody's house, if you were the one that mistakenly built the roof, then you can be held personally responsible. Now, if you subbed it out, or if one of your employees did it, then that's when you can say, no, there's no basis to bring a case against me. I'm just that was my employee. You can take all my business's assets, but you can't take my assets because I didn't do anything wrong.
Okay, that's like the difference between a personal crime, like if he had done something stupid in that. Okay.
Yeah. Or like the engineer on my boat example. If the engineer hooked up the magic pipe and discharged the oil into the ocean, then even though he's a member of a company, he's the one that actually did the crime. But the company can still be held criminally responsible for having an environment where that happens. But the punishment against the company is just going to be paying a fine. it's not going to be imprisonment or probation or anything that happens with that. But that can be a crime for the person that actually discharged the water or discharged the oil into the water.
Man, okay, so it is a little confusing and a lot straighter now. I mean, again, I'm not the brightest bulb in the package, but understanding how a grand jury works and how different levels of accountability are held in different manners. In some cases, it's going to be financial. In some cases, it's going to be punitive, actually, physically punitive in nature. So hopefully, even without the grand jury, the civil lawsuits will bring enough pressure around to hopefully get this thing fixed, because it's only until it started appearing on people's water bill that they start getting upset, right? That Chemours had to put money down, and Chemours like, we don't have $30 million for this, and y'all going to have to cover it.
I think what you'll find is that it's going to come down, the civil cases, it's all going to come down to the permit and whether they know they violated the permit.
And a lot of this is going to go on to DEQ as well. Apparently, they were held to account for not enforcing this and not looking into it for 10 years.
Yep. So you're going to, the way kind of from a flow chart perspective, the way it'll go is, one, did Chemours violate its permit? Was this a situation where we just didn't know that this was toxic? Was this an asbestos type situation?
Right. Was this ignorance or malicious?
Yeah. So then you say, all right. So then if you establish that they knowingly violated the permit, then it's all right. We've got wrongdoing that we've established. Now the question turns to who can enforce that? Who has a remedy against that? Do the individual people that drank the water or dealt with the Gen X in the air, do they have a claim against the people, against the company? Because really what you're looking at is a permit violation. So if you're saying that if you establish that Gen X violated its permit with NCD and Q, then is there a private right of action for people, or is this just something where the government is going to be able to issue a fine and recoup its cost for the cleanup efforts or for whatever it may be? And I think that's the way you'll see it shake out. Is who's the one? Everybody's not going to get to go after them.
Okay.
So it's either going to be the government or private citizens, but you're not going to have a situation where everybody that's drank a glass of water is going to be able to go after them. Now, you might have class actions, and I know at one time, I think in 2017 and 2018, you had a group trying to organize a class action, and I don't know where that's gone or where those efforts lie. But I think what we're going to see, what I would guess we're going to see, is probably the North Carolina state regulatory bodies will be the one really taking the lead and hopefully recouping a lot of the expense that's happened because of this.
So we are looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, Justin, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been incredibly helpful to me, and of course the listeners get to benefit from my ignorance by getting information that they may not want to ask for themselves.
Yeah. Well, you're great, TK. Thanks for having me on, and I'm sorry about the dog and the noise up here, but try to get out of the way.
Not at all. And we might even check in with you with a couple more questions in the future.
All right. Sounds great. I'm happy to come back.
Thanks again, man, and we will see you soon.
All right. See ya. Bye.
And ladies and gentlemen, with that in mind, this concludes another wonderful morning here on the Asylum. That's right. I tell you what, we're going to be back tomorrow with more of the Asylum right here on the Big Talker. And if you don't mind, just stand by here for a minute, and we're going to go to the news or the break, and then right into our friends at Where are we? Consumer Choice Radio. See you tomorrow, folks.
Keeping Wilmington informed. The Big Talker 106.7 FM WFBT, Carolina Beach.
The Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association